prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on Conservative Talk Radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
And welcome back to the second hour of this Thursday edition of Focal Point on AFR Talk. I am your host, Brian Fisher. The program is Focal Point, home of muscular Christianity on Conservative Talk Radio. You are listening to high-definition radio, more content per cubic inch of air than any other place on the radio dial. That's our goal. Whether we achieve it, that's up to you to decide, but that's what we are aiming at. One of the issues that we follow here very closely and carefully at AFA and on Focal Point is the sanctity of human life. Very disturbing story today out of the UK that a lot of babies, severely disabled newborn babies, are being put on what's called the Liverpool Care Pathway. Now, this is a pathway which is a death pathway. I mean, you talk about death panels, this is it. And these are babies, and these doctors say they can't live, so they withhold hydration and food from them. And it's a pitiful thing to watch because they shrink and they shrivel. They're still alive, but their parents are watching them shrink and shrivel because the process can take up to 10 days. So it's horrible and it's inhumane, but it's going on right now in the UK. So the issue of how we deal with the disabled, very, very important to us. And there's something going on at the UN right now that is potentially, going on in the U.S. Senate that's potentially very disturbing when it comes to disabled citizens. And here to help us sort through all of that is Michael Farris, who is the chairman of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. Michael, welcome back to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Hi, Brian. Good to be with you again.
Well, great to have you with us. And I know, Michael, you participated yesterday in a press conference with Rick Santorum, or maybe it was on Tuesday, dealing with a very dangerous treaty that has been coming out of the UN and is being processed by the U.S. Senate right now. Tell us about that and why we ought to be concerned.
Well, the United States Senate is likely to vote on Tuesday of this coming week, maybe on Monday, but certainly early next week, on the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And that treaty, in broad terms, would place America's policy on the domestic issue of how we deal with disabled people and the access and all the issues that go with it. Our policy would be under the supervision of the United Nations, and the UN would regularly monitor whether we're measuring up to UN standards, which means we're no longer free to decide our own policy on our own. We're only decide which way are we going to comply with the UN while the UN looks over our shoulders. And I simply believe whatever policy we're going to make for Americans with disabilities, America should make that policy alone, and the UN should have nothing to say about it. There's also a provision that really hurts parents with special needs and disabled kids, and we can also talk about that.
Well, let's talk about that because obviously I think one of our concerns here at the American Family Association, just as yours is with the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, is concern about parental authority, parental rights. Does this proposed treaty, does it represent a threat to parental rights in the United States?
Absolutely. Article 7 contains the best interest of the child standard, which means that the government can invoke what it thinks is the best interest of the child in every decision relative to children with special needs and disabilities. And the best interest of the child sounds so innocuous, but it's a recognized legal standard that's been around for about 400 years. And it describes the process, and it answers the question, when can the government override the wishes of the parents? And the answer is, up until recently, the government can override the wishes of the parents after it's been proven that the parents have abused their child, neglected their child, or abandoned their child. That's it. And unless there's a break of that parent-child relationship, the government doesn't have the authority to use this best interest of the child standard. But what this treaty does, it takes away any need to prove abuse or neglect. And they're going to say that every parent with every disabled child, with every special needs child in America, the government has the authority to say, no, parent, you wanted the child to be homeschooled. No, we're going to do this instead. You wanted your child to have this treatment? No, we're going to do this instead. You wanted to take your child to this doctor or feed him this food? No, we're going to do this instead. And so we believe that that's just utterly outrageous. And, the Senate proponents of this treaty, like John Kerry and so on, and the Obama administration, are trying to hide this fact. But that's what the standard means, and it's been around for an awful long time. You'll also find that exact same standard in the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child that's been pending for a long time. But to illustrate it, you'll also find that in the New Zealand law on homeschooling. New Zealand's law on homeschooling for so-called normal kids is pretty typical like we would have here in the United States in some states. But on special needs, it just simply says the Minister of Education shall decide in his unilateral discretion whether or not the child shall receive homeschooling or shall remain in the public school program according to the best interest of the child. That's what it means. It means the government decides at its own discretion what's good for your kid. And if you want that, you support this treaty. If you want parents to make decisions, you oppose this treaty, and you call your U.S. senators right now and urge them to vote against this treaty.
And the number to call is 202-224-3121. You can reach your senator's office at that number, 202-224-3121. That'll get you to the Capitol switchboard, and you can ask. You have two senators, and it would be good to leave a message with both of them because this is an extremely dangerous bill. And talking here with Michael Farris of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. And Michael, one issue I want to get to here in just a second, but I'm looking at the story I started the segment with about these severely disabled newborn babies in the UK that are being put, oftentimes overriding the wishes of parents on this death pathway where no matter what the parents want, the doctors say this kid cannot live, severely disabled, too many congenital deformities. We think the best thing for this kid is just to be starved and dehydrated to death. I mean, it seems to me that although that's not specifically contemplated in this treaty, that could be an outcome.
Well, whether they thought about it or not, that's exactly what Rick Santorum said in our press conference. He was holding his daughter Bella, and she's of the category of child that in Britain they would take that position because her official diagnosis is incompatible with life.
Wow.
And so when the doctor gets to decide, the doctor empowered by the government, they're not, these doctors aren't doing it on their own. They're doing it because the government says they have the power to do it. The doctor/government's deciding what they think is best for the child. It goes to the point of deciding whether the child lives or dies. It is that crazy. And if we want to live in a brave new world like that where the bureaucrats and the government and the UN all tell us what to do, fine. This is the beginning of the end of American self-government if we go here. It's just crazy. We cannot let this happen.
And the acronym for this bill is CRPD. That stands for Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, CRPD. But we urge you to call your senator today, 202-224-3121, and urge them to vote against the CRPD treaty. Now, understand, Michael, we got about 20 seconds, but I understand that there are 36 Republican senators that have pledged to vote against this thing, and that would be enough to stop it. Is that correct?
Yes, but some of them are flaking off, so we need to shore them up, and we need to call Republicans and Democrats alike.
Our
guests are Mike Lee and Jim DeMint. Praise them.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Our guest has been Michael Farris, chairman of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association and one of the outspoken critics of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, an enormous threat to parental authority in the United States. Please call your senator today. Michael, thanks again for being with us.
Thank you, Brian. Bye-bye.
Focal Point AFR Talk, back in 2.